Here with attorney Josh Schiffer, who is a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, handles a lot of cases out of Fulton County. And, you know, we've just been having a lot of discussion here about what is involved in these 10 indictments that have been approved, that we've learned, you know, have all been approved. There have been no bills. It's all true bills. In other words, the grand jury is on board with all 10 of those indictments that were presented to them by DA Fani Willis. You were explaining a little bit about the 10 indictments being rooted in 10 different fact patterns. There are 10 different circumstances.
Yeah, each indictment is a standalone case. They can be related to each other, but they're not mutually exclusive, and they don't have a requirement of another case. They can each stand individually as a series of allegations relegated to writing that a grand jury was presented by Fani Willis and that they returned a true bill. 10 separate true bills is what it looks like. Each one of those true bill indictments can have multiple counts, and it can have multiple defendants. Now, this all is theoretically within the overarching investigation, the product of the special grand jury, but by separating it into multiple indictments, multiple charges within each indictment, it provides the state the most flexibility to prosecute the crimes as efficiently as possible. This allows her to choose which indictments to focus on. It allows her to dispose of indictments in different orders. It allows more advantages for the state in the efficient application of prosecutorial justice as devised by the state of Georgia.
And, you know, one thing that, you know, I heard my colleague Rachel Polanski explaining were some of the differences between the federal court system and the state court system, particularly here in Georgia. In federal court, for the alleged interference in the 2020 election, we saw a four-count indictment against the former president. 3 of those were conspiracy charges. But, you know, clearly we're talking about more counts, more charges here.
Yeah, and that's because it's a separate set of allegations. It has different criminal factors involved, many more people involved, and in some ways it's a little bit more of a broad net being thrown. The federal cases, in comparison to what Fani Willis is doing, it's almost a more academic, broad, high-end set of allegations, whereas this is the down and dirty. This is the street-level fight. The charges that I'm expecting after they get uploaded to come about are going to include the Coffee County activities and what members of Trump's organization or whether members of Trump organization were involved into what level in that process of allegedly interfering with the voting machines. Same with the meeting that you were talking about with George Cheedy. He interrupted this meeting, was kicked out. That creates some criminal liability, according to many interpretations, involving open meetings and what they were discussing, and then the cover-up of what happened once they were discovered. If there are documents, and there are documents that we believe Fani Willis has that we have not been able to go and look at or examine, those documents are going to directly lead to what she needed in order to bring these cases. She expects to be able to carry each and every allegation beyond a reasonable doubt at trial.
One thing I do want to point out, because we are talking a lot about the federal case, and there's a whole section on Georgia in the federal indictment. I do want to point out, though, the success rate, the successful prosecution rate of federal cases versus state cases is a lot higher. So generally, it was, let's go for, correct me if I'm wrong, with the federal case we were looking at quality over quantity. They were going for 4 counts that they were pretty darn sure they could successfully prosecute. Here, would you argue that Fani Willis is going to put forth whatever she thinks she might be able to successfully prosecute?
It looks to me like she's chosen to aggressively go after whatever justice she can grab, because she understands her obligation as the elected head prosecutor of Fulton County, Georgia. That presents her with specific obligations. Those are very different obligations than those carried by the Department of Justice, which is all of our federal prosecutions are going to come top down from the Department of Justice. And you're right, federal cases, very few of them ever go to trial, and almost none of them result in acquittals. It has about a 97, 98% conviction rate in federal trials because of the the efforts involved, and they tend to be much more complicated than state cases. State cases, these are faster. There's more aggression necessarily because of some of the speed involved. The charges that she has available to her that the feds didn't. They have different sets of charges to choose from. She had a really open book on some of these more physical charges. So we're talking about the harassment of the women at the State Farm arena, the possibilities of the lies being told to really specific people in smaller settings than on the national stage. By separating into 10 cases, she has a lot of flexibility in where she wants to be aggressive. Is she going to go target specific people more aggressively at the beginning versus the end? It's a lot of dynamics.
And if this is a complex novel, there are a lot of different storylines, and you just touched on one of them. These poor women, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who were, accused of facilitating voting fraud.
Lives were ruined
At State Farm Arena, right? And we know that they were harassed, and there was an investigation. They were finally cleared just this summer after investigation by FBI, GBI, and several other agencies.
Imagine if there is text messages that we know lots of text messages have been gathered reflecting on what those women were going through and showing some opinion or feeling about them. Something like that could be really damaging.
So I want to ask you then, because, I was just reminded when I was looking back at the cases of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, that they were just cleared. It was fairly recently, just this summer, that they were cleared of wrongdoing. So do you think that has to do a little bit with the timing of this? Do you think that that piece of it had to be taken care of? Because then we can go back, or one could go back, the prosecution could go back and say, look, what Rudy Giuliani accused these women of doing and what, Mr. Trump accused these women of doing was wrong. We've investigated and they didn't do this.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity now, and I believe that Fani Willis could have proceeded on a lot of what she has a long time ago. She wasn't able to, both out of professional obligation and consideration to other prosecutorial agencies, and they have discussed some cooperation and collaboration, but also I believe she's continuing to receive more accurate and actionable charges. We had testimony through today, and so she might have just been bolstering, crossing those T's, dotting their I's, because if there's ever been an indictment that is going to be scrutinized and fought, it's this.
True.
Every document in this case is going to go through the ringer.
Absolutely. Tracy and Rick, of course, so we're going to continue the analysis when you come back to us, but for now I want to send it back to you.
Well, before we say goodbye to you, I just want to go back to the subject of Fani Willis and the attacks that she has come under from President Trump and his allies. Of course, they point out the fact that she is a Democrat. They say that this is a partisan witch hunt, and that they have tried, unsuccessfully, but tried to get her removed from this case. Does it seem to you, and maybe Josh, as a defense attorney, you could talk about different strategies that may be employed by the defense. Could she be put on trial as much as any of the people who are going to be indicted, whose names are going to appear in these indictments tonight?
That's an excellent question. And Josh is unable to hear you, so I'm going to reiterate some of this. So Rick is essentially pointing out how, former President Trump has really launched some attacks publicly against Fani Willis. But he's asking, could Fani Willis, accused of being a politically motivated witch hunt, could she go on trial?
As someone that has been accused of doing something wrong?
Yeah, political.
Everybody in America, no one's above the law, allegedly. So, yeah, I don't see any crime that she has been accused of, so that would prevent her from being put on
Maybe
trial.
A politically motivated prosecution?
Would there be political people acting against her? I don't put it past anybody in this. This is one of the most aggressive political communities that we have nationally. In Georgia, a lot of people don't understand. Fani Willis is under scrutiny by our very own governor. There's this lawsuit that she and a couple other DAs have become party to because there's an effort by state legislators to monitor and take over underperforming or less performing prosecutor offices. And Fani Willis definitely has some conflicts with the state's opinion there.
Okay.